ferengi. You worthless, tiny-eared fool. Don't you know the first rule of acquisition?
Yes, brother.
Then say it.
Once you give back their money, you have their money.
Exactly. The third rule clearly states, spend more for an acquisition than you have to. The sixth rule of acquisition expressly states...
Never have, family. I certainly never have.
Are you kidding? That's the seventh rule of acquisition.
The ninth rule of acquisition clearly states that profit plus opportunity equals instinct.
The 10th rule of acquisition is eternal. Greed is eternal. Rule of acquisition number 16.
Rule of acquisition 17. A ferengi. Contract is a contract.
And a ferengi.
It's no ferengi at all.
The 18th rule of acquisition.
Never profit.
21st rule of acquisition.
I'm glad you agree.
But the 22nd rule says profit.
Rule of acquisition number 23. Nothing is for money.
Never of a ferengi. Rule of acquisition number 31.
I wanted to learn for the very best.
Which brings to mind the 33rd rule of acquisition. It
never hurts a boss.
And as the 34th rule of acquisition states for business.
That's the 35th rule.
Oh, you're right. What's the 34th?
Business. It's easy to get them confused. The 47th rule of acquisition says, trust a man wearing man.
Just remember one thing, the sharper the smile, the bigger the knife.
48th rule of acquisition. At times like this, I'm reminded of the 57th rule of acquisition. Good customers are good. I think I agree with the 59th rule of acquisition. I think I agree advice. I think I agree seldom. I think I agree.
Risk the world the greater the profit.
62nd rule.
That's right.
In accordance with the 74th rule of acquisition, knowledge equals nothing. I've enclosed the specifications you've requested.
He said there were plenty of business opportunities right outside my door. But no, I had to follow the 75th rule of acquisition. Must I quote you the 76th rule of acquisition?
The 76th?
Every once in a while, declare the hell out of your enemies.
Finances don't mix. Rule of acquisition 94.
What is the 95th rule of acquisition? Guy? He knows the rules better than you do.
Thank you for restoring my faith in the 98th rule of acquisition. Every man has his price. As a wise man once wrote,
Rule of acquisition number 102.
good lad. There's nothing to discuss.
But you know what the 103rd rule of acquisition says.
Not offhand.
Slave.
I don't care either. Dignity and sack is whack. Rule of acquisition number 109.
But remember rule of acquisition number 111. Treat people in your debt like people in your debt.
Rule of acquisition 112. Have sex with the boss's sister. Rule of acquisition 125. You're dead.
Why?
Why?
Rule of acquisition number 139, if I'm not mistaken.
I hadn't thought of that.
Really? I had.
But remember, be discreet.
Rule of acquisition 168.
Just don't forget the 190th rule of acquisition.
Trust all. Hear nothing. Good advice, sir.
It's always good business to know about business before. Business and
Which rule of acquisition is that?
oh, one of the high numbers. 194, I think.
What about rule of acquisition 203? New customers suck sometimes.
Sometimes the only question is an answer.
Rule of acquisition 208.
Your brother can quote rules of acquisition too. I believe his favorite is 211. Employees, other employees, don't hesitate to employ them.
Rule of acquisition number 214. Never begin a business negotiation.
But also remind him of the 217th rule of acquisition.
You can't water a fish. As the 223rd rule of acquisition says.
Please, I haven't heard a rule of acquisition in 7 years, and I don't want to hear one now.
Lust lasts longer than Latin rule of acquisition 229.
Maybe, but lust can be a lot more fun.
Rule of acquisition 239. Never be a product. Remember rule of acquisition 263. Never allowed
family to stand in the way of opportunity.
But I happen to be a firm believer in rule of acquisition number 285. No. Rule of acquisition 286. It's all over.
There is no such rule.
There should be.